You're looking at one of the most feared foods in human history. In Europe, it was banned, accused of witchcraft, and nicknamed the devil's apple. In China, it's treated as a vegetable, often served on top of a bowl of rice. How did a toxic mountain weed from the Andes become the crucial fuel for the Industrial Revolution, a tool of royal deception, and now a secret weapon for China's national security? This is the bizarre global crusade of the potato. Our story begins in 1537. High in the freezing mist of the Andes, a band of exhausted Spanish conquistadors marched into an Incan village in search of gold and silver. They found no treasure, but in the storage rooms of the village, they noticed something strange. Baskets filled with small, rough, mud-covered tubers that the locals called papas. The Incas had been cultivating these tubers for thousands of years across the high plateaus, developing hundreds of varieties adapted to altitudes where no grain could grow. Some were purple, some yellow, some bitter enough to require days of processing before they were safe to eat. They had even invented the world's first freeze-dried food, chuño, by leaving potatoes out in the freezing night air and stomping out the moisture with their bare feet, creating a lightweight preserved food that could last for years. When the potato crossed the Atlantic and arrived in Europe around 1570, it was not met with roses and red carpets. Instead, Europeans viewed it with disgust and terror. The first reason was botanical. The potato belongs to the Solanaceae family, the same family as the deadly nightshade, belladonna. When potato leaves and stems are exposed to sunlight, they produce solanine, a potent toxin that causes hallucinations and death. Imagine discovering a promising new crop, only to learn it is a close cousin of one of the most lethal plants on the continent. That was Europe's first impression of the potato. Rumors spread that it was the creation of witches and devils. Theologians searched the Bible and declared, "There is no mention of the potato in the Holy Scriptures. God did not create this plant." Because it grew in the dark underground, invisible and shapeless, the potato was accused of causing leprosy, dropsy, and impotence. In 1748, the French Parliament went so far as to ban its cultivation entirely, declaring it dangerous to public health. Across the continent, it was relegated to animal feed or served only to dying patients and prisoners in the hospitals of Seville, people whose fate no longer mattered. For nearly 200 years, Europe sat on top of a nutritional gold mine and refused to dig it up. But by the 18th century, Europe was plunged into endless wars and the freezing crop failures of the Little Ice Age. Faced with starving populations, rulers realized the potato's biological genius. It produced 3 times the calories per acre of wheat, tolerated cold, poor soil, and required very little water. More importantly, when marching armies swept through and burned above-ground wheat fields, the potatoes hidden deep beneath the soil survived. It was nature's own bunker, invisible underground and nearly indestructible. To force peasants to eat it, monarchs resorted to elaborate psychological tricks. In Prussia, King Frederick the Great issued a decree mandating potato cultivation in 1756. When the peasants refused, he planted a royal potato field and ordered heavily armed soldiers to guard it day and night. However, he secretly instructed the guards, "If anyone tries to steal the potatoes, look the other way." The local peasants, observing the heavy security, reasoned, "If the king guards this crop so fiercely, it must be incredibly valuable." They began sneaking into the fields at night to steal the tubers. The reverse psychology worked brilliantly, and Frederick earned the affectionate title of the Potato King. To this day, Germans place potatoes on his grave to honor his memory. In France, the agriculturalist Antoine Parmentier used a similar stunt. He hosted royal banquets where King Louis XVI and Marie-Antoinette wore potato blossoms in their hair, turning the once reviled plant into a symbol of aristocratic fashion overnight. Parmentier also hired guards to watch a potato field near Paris by day, only to withdraw them at night to invite theft. The potato had officially conquered the European table. While it took Europe nearly 2 centuries of suspicion to accept the potato, the tuber met a very different fate when it arrived in China during the late Ming dynasty. The contrast is striking. In Europe, the potato arrived in a civilization that feared what grew beneath the surface. A world shaped by biblical narratives of sin, darkness, and the underworld. In China, the earth was not a place of punishment. It was a source of life. The Chinese had eaten sweet potatoes, yams, and taro for centuries, pulling nourishment from the soil with no spiritual anxiety. When the potato first arrived, likely carried along the maritime trade routes through Southeast Asia, it was immediately presented to the imperial court as a rare and exotic delicacy for the Ming emperors. It was given elegant, descriptive names: tudo, meaning earth bean; yangyu, or foreign taro; and malingshu, horsebell yam, because the tubers resembled the bells worn by horses. But the true potato revolution in China occurred in the mid-18th century, during the reign of the Qianlong emperor of the Qing dynasty. A long era of peace had triggered a population explosion, pushing China's population past 300 million. The fertile river valleys used for wet rice cultivation became overcrowded. Millions of poor farmers migrated to the steep, rocky highlands of Sichuan, Yunnan, and Guizhou, remote provinces where thin soil clung to cliff faces and winter winds cut through the mountain passes. On these barren limestone slopes, rice and wheat could not survive. But the potato, carrying the hardy genetic blueprint of its Andean ancestors, thrived. It became a life raft for millions of migrant families. Unlike in Europe, where potatoes were grown on vast, flat fields as a singular staple crop, Chinese farmers integrated them into terraced hillside plots alongside corn and other vegetables. The potato was adopted not to replace rice or wheat, but to supplement the diet, preventing starvation in areas where grain was scarce. Because it was grown alongside other crops, it was culturally categorized as a vegetable, a kai to accompany the meal, rather than the zhuxi, the staple starch itself. The difference in how the West and China integrated the potato led to two vastly different historical trajectories. In Europe, the potato became the biological engine of the Industrial Revolution. It was the cheapest source of calories to feed the massive labor force crowding into the coal mines and textile mills of Manchester, Lille, and Silesia. Friedrich Engels went so far as to declare that the potato played a historically revolutionary role equal to that of iron. Yet, this total reliance on a single crop also paved the way for one of the greatest tragedies of the modern era, the Great Irish Famine of 1845 to 1849. By the early 19th century, the average Irish laborer was eating between 4 and 6 kilograms of potatoes per day, and almost nothing else. Because they planted almost exclusively a single variety, the lumper, the extreme lack of genetic diversity left the entire island defenseless when a strain of late blight swept through. Planting an entire nation's food supply in one variety was like building a city with only one road in and out. When that road collapsed, there was no escape. The potato fields turned to black, rotting mush overnight. The stench of decay hung over entire counties. 1 million people died of starvation and disease, and another million fled across the Atlantic to the United States, permanently altering the demographic map of the Western world. In China, the potato grew quietly without triggering catastrophic collapse. If Europe's agricultural strategy was a high-wire act balanced on a single rope, China's was a safety net woven from many threads. The Chinese diet was more diversified, and farmers never placed their entire survival on a single tuber. They consumed the potato as a crisp vegetable. The famous tudo-si is a perfect testament to this. The potatoes are sliced paper-thin, soaked in water to wash away excess starch, and flash-fried over intense heat so they remain crunchy. To a Chinese palate, a soft, floury mashed potato is often considered a failure of culinary texture, unless it is stewed slowly with beef. They prefer the crispness, the clean snap of a quick stir-fry. Yet the 21st century has brought a dramatic plot twist. In 2015, the Chinese Ministry of Agriculture announced a policy that would reshape the future of global farming: the potato as a staple food strategy. The government set a goal to elevate the potato into China's fourth major staple crop, alongside rice, wheat, and corn. The reason for this shift is ecological. China feeds 20% of the world's population with only 7% of its arable land, and its water tables are dropping rapidly. The North China Plain, one of the country's most productive grain regions, is pumping groundwater at a rate that could exhaust its aquifers within decades. Rice and wheat cultivation are incredibly thirsty processes. The potato, by contrast, uses up to 30% less water than rice and can grow in the dry, marginal lands of the Northwest. To shift the culinary habits of 1 billion people, Chinese state-backed institutes have developed potato-based noodles, steamed buns, and breads, blending potato flour with traditional wheat. The challenge is immense. convincing a civilization that has built its identity around rice for millennia to embrace a tuber it has always considered a side dish. From a humble vegetable, the potato is being transformed into a strategic shield for the food security of the world's second-largest economy. The journey of the potato, from the slopes of the Andes to the industrial mills of northern England, and into the terraced fields of Yunnan, proves that food is never just about nutrition. It is history, politics, and culture written on a plate. The West used the potato as fuel to build the modern industrial world, learning a bitter lesson about the dangers of monoculture along the way. China adopted it as a versatile crop to sustain its mountain populations, and now looks to it as the key to sustainable agriculture in an era of water scarcity. 500 years after the conquistadors dismissed those mud-covered tubers in the Andes, the potato is quietly staging its greatest conquest yet, not through deception or royal decree, but through the simple, stubborn fact that it can grow where almost nothing else will. The devil's apple, it turns out, was salvation all along.